the Coalition for Cannabis Standards and Ethics. And this was a group that informally started in 2010, but started to create their bylaws and purpose probably more formally in 2011. And then I got hired in 2012 because, it's an all volunteer run organization with board members. That organization got started because there was a bill that actually had passed the legislature that would have regulated the medical market at the time. And actually a lot of the business owners that ended up forming the Coalition for Cannabis Standards and Ethics were primary in helping to pass that legislation. They went down and testified, and they were medical business owners already and really saw the need to regulate the medical market because it was a very gray, unregulated market. And so they actually were successful. I mean, I think we all know how hard it is to pass a bill through the legislature, and it passed, and it landed on the governor's desk, Governor Gregoire at the time, and she essentially gutted it, vetoed the biggest parts of the bill, and really kept the market where it was in terms of unregulated Wild West scenario. So the city of Seattle reached out to some of the business owners that were involved with that push and said to them, since we have no ability to regulate you through laws or anything, we would really love it if you could find a way to self-regulate. And so they started to meet and try to figure out, okay, well, if we did that, what would it look like? What would be our code of ethics? How would we want to hold ourselves up as business owners? One of the first things that they did was agree to pay their business taxes, even though they weren't required to, because they were not technically recognized businesses, but they still paid all of their taxes. And really tried to work with the city and regulators to make sure that they were doing everything properly.
You can have a marketplace in place, and every marketplace has either a codified or non-codified set of maxims, effectively rules, laws that are in place that allow for it to function smoothly. And we realized we didn't. Outside of the state statute that existed for the one provider at a time, we didn't really have something in writing from our local jurisdictions. And together with the same group of people and a slightly enhanced circle that I met through the city of Seattle at a round table. At a discussion, we started thinking like, oh, well, if there are no rules, we should put some rules together. We should put some maxims together. And from that was born an organization called the Coalition for Cannabis Standards and Ethics.
I was leading a group of people for King County that helps industry members, and it was called IRAC. It was a group of regulatory people, state and local, who helped businesses by clarifying what the rules were when things were confusing. And I put them together years ago. And then this industry got voted in, and we knew the rules would be very, very confusing and people wouldn't know what to do. And frankly, this industry, as we both know, has been around for many, many years, and people had to get really good at hiding. Well, all of a sudden, now they had to be out there, and they had to record everything, and they had to be above board in everything they did without even knowing what the rules were, because the rules weren't there yet. So this crew got together, they got all the agencies together, and they made a book saying, if you're doing this, here are the people you need to communicate with. Here are the things you need to consider. And they put that together and then delivered that to CCSC, I think it was. And they asked me, as the guy who started all of this years ago, to come and actually do that presentation, which I was happy to do.
When when they were forming the Coalition for Cannabis Standards and Ethics, they were doing a lot of work, but they were also business owners, and 502 got passed. And so then there was a whole new thing that got thrust in their faces, and they recognized that they needed help, and they needed hired help. They needed somebody whose focus was the organization. And that's where I stepped in. I interviewed for the job but because I was working with one of the board members at the time for his own dispensary, and he really encouraged me to apply for the job, which I did. And I like to tell this story. It's the hardest interview I've ever had in my life because if anybody knows cannabis business owners, they are tough. They need to know that you are capable of the job that they're asking you to do and daring me at the same time. So it was a very, very hard interview, and wasn't even sure how it went. But then I got the job, and I started to go to the meetings. So the monthly Thursday meetings that we have, that started back with the Coalition for Cannabis Standards and Ethics. It was every fourth Thursday. I think it was every second and fourth Thursday of the month. They would have their general meetings. And then the board would meet every week on Thursday. So I started going into all those meetings and just soaking up like a sponge the industry, past, present, and ideally where it was going into the future. And, the rules were starting to be written at the LCB for 502. That was the process that was happening. Obviously, no stores were open, no licenses had been given out. So really paying attention to all of the regulations that were going on and how we could potentially influence them.
So essentially what it all meant was getting in front of the group and presenting that document, which I did. And then the group decided to start asking me questions because they knew I was a small business owner at one point and I had been a regulator. And they asked questions for over an hour.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was great. I loved every second of it because here they are. They're brand new as business owners, legal business owners in an industry that's now legal. They're used to hiding. The rules don't make sense. The rules are changing daily. Mm-hmm. So there were a lot of questions, especially about how to work with government. And one of the things I pushed is you're unique. Mm-hmm. Do not sit back and wait for them to make the regulations because they're learning right now too. Get involved. Help them learn what they need to know. Push what works for the industry as well as what works for the community. Make the rules work for both. Mm-hmm. And most regulators really love that because then, to be quite honest about it, as a regulator, you want both sides yelling at you about the same level because then you know you did a good job. Okay? And the best way to do that is to work with both sides, the community and the people that are regulated. Mm-hmm. So that's what I push. And you're president of the TCA, so I push that a lot.
Yeah.
And it's worked out pretty well. I thought I was done at that point. And then Laura Kaminsky called me a few weeks later and said, well, you've been elected. I had no idea what that meant. Apparently, the board had voted to elect me to be on their board. And that was really nice, but I said, no, that's not where you want me. You want me as a strategic advisor. And the reason you want that is because if you do something that really pisses off your membership, you need to have somebody you can fire. Okay? You fire me. That way you show instantly that you're taking what you do seriously. Okay? So, which is why I'm still a strategic advisor.
I recognized that we needed an association, and I really wanted it to be one that was numbers based. And so I was part of the original crew along with AC and Rachel Kurtz and Greg from Marijuana Venture that started WACA. And so we were meeting with Martin Tobias. He was part of that. And Vicky showed up there, obviously, because she and Martin had a relationship, professional relationship. And John Comerford and Alin, we were all kind of part of this thing. And then we sat down and realized, Alin might not have been there. We sat down and realized that our idea of what an association was going to look like and being, membership based and democratically driven was not the same as the other half of the group. And so we split off and we created the Washington Federation of Marijuana Businesses, which was completely about data. We sent out surveys, we aggregated the data, and we showed up on the Hill and said, this % of our survey responses said that cannabis as agriculture is the most important topic that they have. This % about, so we just kind of went through those things. We never got our feet off the ground per se, like we kept it going, but money's tight and strapped.
When I kind of really woke up, for lack of a better term, that I really did see the medicinal value. I mean, I knew that there was a lot of medicinal value in it, but I had never really experienced it myself. And so after I experienced that and then started, exploring more of that stuff, legality came along. And then, or I should say regulation, because it's not legal. So regulation came along, and it was almost like chaos. Nobody knew where to go, what to do, how to do this, what's going on. And so a friend of mine sent me a link to a meetup group in Ballard. Said, these guys want to just, hey, let's talk about weed kind of thing. And so I went to that, and next thing you know, I mean, it was packed. I mean, that's where I first met Morgan, Nana, David Rhines, all those people, David Murray, all those people were there. And next thing you know, we were starting to meet weekly, and there was about, a dozen of us or so that consistently met, and we kind of formed what we were thinking about calling the CDC, the Canna Business, or the CBC, Canna Business Coalition. But then we're like, no, those red shirt things, they got us red. Yeah, no, we're not going to do that, because we were trying to find a way that people could actually navigate the regulatory pathways in a simple, easy fashion. So we then started talking about forming a nonprofit. And then we ran into Joe Rammel, who said, "Hey, I just started the paperwork on this, WM Washington Marijuana Association. Do you want to take it?" We're like, "Let's go."
It was impressive, and then there was a lot going on. I remember rules being written just for absolutely everything, and at the same time, the Coalition for Cannabis Standards and Ethics was supporting an effort called Health Before Happy Hour, which was really trying to make sure that the medical market survived in this new reality, making sure that patients weren't forgotten. And so there was a bunch of people in our circle, one in particular, Carrie Boyder, who was really leading the charge on that, because we sort of saw the writing on the wall, that, this was going to start becoming about tax revenue and dollars, and we would forget why we wanted to legalize in the first place, which is ultimately, this is medicine for a lot of folks, and we needed to protect their right to access it, whether or not they have a prescription. And really concerned that the patients would get forgotten, and unfortunately we saw that being the case. So
right. And through the years, I've been a proud incrementalist, because I've seen over the years, there's things that I still want changed, but you have to do it in increments, because you have to do things and let people see that the sky doesn't fall. I think that that's one of the things that we did really well with HempFest, is just pull it off, be professional.
As you very well know, the Coalition for Cannabis Standards and Ethics, I think it was September of 2014, held a roundtable to really reach out to the other organizing factors across the state. And those included folks out of Bellingham, out of Olympia, out of Yakima, out of Spokane, the southern part of the state, Vancouver, and I even believe, like the southern central part of the state. There, I'm somehow remembering there was representation from Kennewick, but anyway, there was a broader representation than just what was developing within the city of Seattle and King County. Seattle is, for the state of Washington, and I think at this point nationally and internationally, it's a very important city. There's a lot of thought development and within the city and the surrounds, and so just given the fertility of this region, you just open up channels for conversation and exchange of ideas, and so that provided a very very healthy atmosphere and community to be able to develop industry and business and policy and so on. And the goal really was, okay, let's try to broaden this. We did have members within the CCSC that were from different jurisdictions outside of King County, and we knew that there were other groups that were formed, that had formed and were also organizing, and that there were overlapping initiatives that we all shared. And we thought we can, if we can find common ground and really converge on a set of of goals, and then agree on the tactics for implementing those goals, that we grow much farther. We can share resources and mobilize and so on and so forth. And at the September 2014 meeting, the Cannabis Alliance was born.
I'm trying to remember. It might have been 2014, where there was a bill that was put up by the Cannabis Association, so WACA, that was looking to consolidate the market, or not consolidate, I'm sorry, to merge the markets from medical and I-502, which was an important thing to do. It was important that happen, but the way that the bill was written, there were a lot of us that were very concerned. Again, we were very concerned about what would happen to the legacy businesses that had been there all along the way, serving patients. We were worried about losing their knowledge and their passion for the industry, and the fact that they risked so much to make sure that was available to patients and people who needed it. So we started to really work hard to get the bill into a form that we thought was better. And again, this is my perspective coming from the Coalition for Cannabis Standards and Ethics, CCSE. But then, there were a few more that started to work hand in hand with us, specifically WMA, Washington Marijuana Association, Northwest Producer Processors and Retailers Association, which is another one, and then CASM at the time. And all four of us were down working really hard, trying to have meetings with legislators, trying to convey the importance of making sure that they got it right, and recognize that one of the things we kept saying is, why are we all working so hard as separate organizations? It's actually making it harder for the legislators to know who they're talking to. With all of these associations with their different acronyms, it's like alphabet soup, and they get confused. I just saw somebody from the cannabis industry. That's not you, and recognizing that we were actually doing ourselves a disservice because we weren't more formally combined. And so after that legislative session, which we did get some things into the bill, it was by no means perfect, but the idea was that there would be a priority system that would look at some things to put the additional licenses that they would be giving ideally into the hands of legacy businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Now that, again, didn't end up really working. But, we thought that we had been relatively successful, and we tried really hard to work together. And more importantly, I think we recognized what we had in common, that we had more in common than we had different. And it was really important that we work closely together.
It is an industry, yes, but it's also a civil rights struggle that we need to continue on to not only make an industry that other people in other places want to have in their community because it's a better way of doing things, but that also fights for people's rights. You know, it's always been that way, that the injustice of the war on cannabis has been so stunning, and yet people just think it's about getting high. If it was just about getting high, I wouldn't have been involved all these years. It's about the atrocities that people are protesting about right now, right? This isn't some nebulous concept. So I think that's special about our industry. Not only is it a way to have businesses and to provide tax revenue for the state, which I'm happy to do, guys, but it's a way to make the world a better and more just place.
I also do that for a number of other industries and a number of other groups, and it works best if I just stay a strategic advisor and do not have a vote. I'm going to help you understand where you need to go, help to open the doors, but I don't vote on those things. This is your organization to run.
Mm-hmm.
That then turned into 4 organizations wanting to meet and see how they could work together. That was a 2-day retreat. That was the first time as a facilitator, and I've been facilitating for over 30 years, that I learned in the cannabis industry, you do not give people long breaks. Because if you do, they come back and giggle a lot. So after a couple of really giggle sessions through the whole thing, by the end of the second day, they had agreed all 4 organizations would donate 2 board members to an interim group. And that interim group would see if those 4 organizations could build a larger single organization that met all the needs. And then that interim board would be the board that spent 11 months developing all the policies, the procedures, rules of the road. And that was the founding board. Mm-hmm. And then from there, you're aware of the rest of it. I'll tell you right now, this organization would not be where it is, would not probably exist if it wasn't for Laura Kaminsky. Period. I've worked with all kinds of executive directors. She is the most knowledgeable, dedicated person I've ever met, especially for this industry. Mm-hmm. And she wanted it to work really, really bad and put in more hours than was ever paid for, met with more people, stressed herself out, but made it happen when it was brand new and very difficult to do. And she got in there and made it happen. Mm-hmm. And I have nothing but respect for her for that.
We had legislators in the room. We had, governor's office in the room. And the idea was, how can we craft a message in terms of what we would like to see fixed around the market for the next legislative session. So we really started to dig in and decided that when we came up with that sort of list of asks, the short list of asks, that we would present it utilizing experts in our field to regulators and legislators, which was really the impetus for the very first summit. So at the summit, we actually had laying out on the very first summit, we had laying out on every table a brochure with our list of demands.
We did notice that we were all of a sudden running into a lot of the same people in Olympia with wanting a lot of the same things. And I started going to the CCSE meetings, and I'm just going, damn, there's a lot of parallels here, a lot of parallels here. And, knowing me the way you know me now, it's like, I could not, that was a hell of a lot of work to do all the things that I could vision in my head. I couldn't do that stuff by myself. There's no way anybody could do those things by myself. And then we all just started to talk to each other. And, Lara was a glue that kind of kept us all together with Ray and those guys. And we then just hashed out a way to become the Cannabis Alliance. And it's funny, John Davis and I were the ones that came up with the name, the Cannabis Alliance. I think it was John, actually, because we were broken up into groups. And like our group was to go figure out a name, and somebody else's group was, you know, to do their other things. And there was like 3 or 4 of us in this group. We're just talking and we're talking about how we're all together and how we're all allied. And then John's like, the Cannabis Alliance. And it's like, we're done.
This portion of the Cannabis Alliance harkens to the fact that it's an inclusive, all encompassing camp set of actors that are moving ideas forward. And the means there's only one. Cannabis, as we know, is the topic of the conversation. So that's the time period that the alliance was born in. And I think we really benefited early on with the CCSC by adopting a democratic model for moving ideas forward. Mm. It wasn't based on resource contribution to making the organization function. It really was. It really was. Hey, you know, we're operating with very few resources, if at all. How do we mobilize the ideas that we have with very scant resources? And we found that one way to do that is to really distribute the load by opening up the conversation to a very broad coalition, and that seems to be working thus far. And what's more is it provides a forum to be able to have those conversations. And to this day, we, you know, as an organization, the Cannabis Alliance, we keep a very broad base of conversation alive, not just within Washington State, but even nationally and internationally at this point. So there you go. That's a little bit of the history.
In the interviews, a few people have referenced the fact that you might have been the one to have come up with DAVES as the acronym. And if you can tell me what your recollection of that conversation around how you came to those 3 values, and just tell me the story of DAVES.
So remembering a mission statement is a really important thing. Right? Like, this was my first board experience. This is, you know, my first business of this size, but like I knew that knowing what the mission statement with it was, and underneath Laura's great tutelage from all of her education, it was really important to get this thing memorized. And I could not, for the life of me, get it all every time. I was just lost. And so, you know, in school, I've always figured out ways and little, you know, things to figure out, and, you know, dedicated of a vital, ethical, and sustainable industry becomes DAVES.
Because we all were very attached to the organizations that we were a part of currently. Mm-hmm. And the idea of giving up the name, all the things that you've worked for, you know, that title, it's a difficult thing. It's a lot of self that's involved with it, the ego that's attached to this identity. And when we all made the decision to lay down our egos and assume a new collective vision, that was a really, really powerful moment. And that was when we chose a new name. And we also chose our mission statement then as well, which I hope everybody knows at this point, you know, that we are dedicated to the advancement of a vital, ethical, and sustainable cannabis industry. And, you know, each one of those words we were, you know, I said, we now have gotten to the habit where, you know, we say it very freely and easily now, which is really great. Like, the membership now knows what the mission is. It's really important. But each one of those words was selected with a lot of thought. Vitality, you know, making sure that what we're involved with and what we're building is vital, that it's something that we as human beings need to be healthy. And then the you know, and it's adaptable, the sustainability piece, right? Like, you can sustain mm-hmm. over time, but it's also, we can sustain one another. We sustain our workforce in terms of good business practices. And of course, we're ethical. the decisions we make for the greater good. So, I know that we kind of roll off the tongue the mission statement, but it really truly is a guiding force for what this organization does. Anytime we come up against a conundrum, we're not sure which way to go, we look to the mission statement. Are we fulfilling that if we go this direction or that direction? And
I think what it really comes down to is simple. Is like everybody in the room realized that what we were trying to do was more important than me or you or, anything like that. It wasn't about the individual. It's not about the individual. Sure, maybe my personal feelings, I would like to see something done differently or vice versa. But the reality is that we're moving towards an end goal. Mm-hmm. And you have to just put your ego aside and say, fuck it. It's not about me. It's about the industry, and it's about the patients, and it's about what's best for this world. Because cannabis has just got so much to offer for this world. And the more I'm learning about it, the more I realize it's like, one, I don't know as much as I thought I knew. That's always the case. You don't know what you don't know. And the more you know, the more you don't know. And so anyways, so that's where, you just have to step away. You have to step away from it and say that this mission, we're dedicated to the advancement of a vital and ethical and sustainable industry. That mission is more important than me being able to do any of my personal things, and my own business aspirations or political moves or anything. It's just, we have to move the industry forward in the best way possible and change history.
So CCSC met up with all the different groups, with Washington Marijuana Businesses, and CORE wasn't around there, and COSM, and Producer, Processors, and Retailers of Northwest Washington, which might be the worst name ever for an association. And so they all came together and they did their retreat and created the Cannabis Alliance. And I showed up real quick afterwards. They had recommended me as an adjunct board member because I had started the 502 Google group. And so I already had this community of people where we were talking and listening. And so I was an adjunct member that first year while everybody was interim. And then I was voted onto the board and voted as president the next 3 years.
Our industry is still surviving. I know it's not easy for anyone right now, but we're still winning. And, when we emerge as essential services in multiple states, like that's, there's still people that think you could put the genie back into the bottle, and you can't. But those people are still out there and active and, trying to prevent us from taking the next steps.
I would like to see a lot of things happen, but it all boils down to one thing, and that's people caring and people coming together and unifying. Mm-hmm. We need unity. And that's the thing. I'm more now, like I said, I'm not necessarily a paid industry person, but I'm definitely an advocate and a champion for this industry. And I want to see everybody succeed. I know that everybody can do it, but we need to bring people together to do it. We need to educate them to do it. We need to take the people that sometimes we may find the most resistance with and find some sort of commonality to get them under the banner of the Alliance. Because when you look at the overall mission statement, how can you argue with that?
Yeah.
How can you argue unless you are maybe only dedicated to your own needs, right. Which, we are not put, I believe we are not put on this planet to serve ourselves. We're put on this planet to serve humanity.
I like to say it's a pretty fun group. First and foremost, it's a very open group. I don't. I guess that's what I would say. It's kind of a come as you are organization, and we really are quite open. And given the fact that we're a democratically run organization, or the basis is a democratic organization, it really lends itself to the strongest arguments are going to win. because you vote.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, the summit has always been amazing. I mean, the very first summit was, it was a big risk. Like, something like that had never been done before. And the summit's always been pulled together somehow with string and glue and a little bit of tape, and, it's always like, is this going to work? Are the conversations, are the right people in the room? And I remember the very first summit ending up in one of the hotel rooms, a bunch of people that had attended, and just how amazing it was that the conversations just couldn't stop. People couldn't stop talking about what they'd heard during the day, how it inspired them, what it made them think about. I wasn't there, but there was a few people that completely closed down the bar in the lobby. They just couldn't stop talking. And that was really the goal, is to get people excited and inspired and wanting to share and work together. And the fact that it worked was so exciting. And then it was like, can we do it again? And we just kept doing it again. And every year was so amazing and so surprising that there's just something magical that would happen at the summit every year. Mm-hmm. So that's absolutely a memory. Kickball, when we were doing kickball. I mean, I love the events. I love being with people and hearing, just being with people and hearing what they have to say and getting to know them. But kickball was always fun because it wasn't a business event. It was just fun. And people really got to kind of let their hair down and you got to know another side of them. Mm-hmm. So the people that would go out to kickball, that was always a good time. And in terms of regulatory or legislative stuff, two things that come to mind are, well, kind of encapsulated into one, but our packaging win with making it voluntary to include the dosing cup and reducing the thickness of bags and the impact that makes on the environment, and how something so seemingly so small can make such a big difference. Mm-hmm. And the other part of that experience was one of the open sessions at the Liquor and Cannabis Board was, one of the listen and learns that they had. And there wasn't a lot of industry people that had gone down there that day for some reason. But there was a lot of prevention folks there. And I just remember getting up and feeling nervous because I was sort of the odd one out in the room. And the reason why they were there was because we had proposed the change. And getting up and explaining all the reasons behind it, and having we took a break and having them all surround me and be like, "You're actually talking a lot of sense, and do you want to go have lunch with us?" And I was like, "Absolutely, that's what we do. We try to connect, right? Mm-hmm. And we try to, make people who think that they don't understand what we're doing or have a fear around what we're doing. We create that relationship and make them see we're human beings and we're not here to hurt a bunch of children. But having those interactions where you really start seeing a new understanding from people who traditionally would be opposed to what we're doing for lack of knowing about it. And I think that's the other piece, just educating people is one of my favorite things that we do.
Like the Cannabis Alliance is hands down, in my opinion, the most successful cannabis organization in Washington State with the values that I believe in. And I believe that we got there because of Lara Kaminsky and because of Ray Carveth. Like those are the two that kept us centered and on track and made sure that we had this foundation built on granite instead of sand. Like those two are so under talked about, popularized, whatever. But those are the two that really made the Cannabis Alliance what it is today. The rest of us were just kind of along for the ride and did what we were told to do. But Ray and Lara, they're the rock stars. As far as where the Alliance is and where it's going, I just see the Alliance getting bigger and larger and being more and more credible. I think that right now we're in this precipice of change and transition in the world, right? Where we're kind of moving away from, the reptilian, the, corporate America, money and power and greed over everything else, and forget the environment, like all these socially conscious views that the Alliance has at its core is what's really coming to light and becoming important in the world right now. And I think it's just going to make us that much stronger as we move forward, incredible as we move forward. And I think that the stars are the limit, sky's the limit, moon's the limit, galaxy. The universe is the limit.